Hello, my name is Brandon Armstrong, and we did a project for world history, and my project is about Ebola, and my driving question is how can the Ebola virus outbreak help us with the coronavirus today? And I've done a lot of extensive research, but the only answer I could find was that we should be more prepared. We should start working on a cure for the virus or disease when we first hear about it in another country or continent, so then by the time it reaches an area or a global pandemic, then they can hopefully have a cure or at least be able to keep the infection to a minimum. They should also stack up and have extra medical supplies in case there's a disease or outbreak that reaches them, so then they won't be rushed to find and make medical supplies or get to the point where they have to reuse their masks and stuff, which makes it a bigger risk for both the patients and doctors. So now this is a little bit of history about the Ebola virus. So it's a rare but severe disease found in countries in Africa, which can often have a fatal outcome of 25 to 90% of the infected people. Transmission of the viruses occurs from person to person through direct contact with blood and other bodily fluids. The virus enters the body through a break in the skin or through the eyes, nose, or mouth of an unprotected person. The first documented outbreak of Ebola virus disease occurred in 1976 in the Democratic Republic of Congo, at the time known as Zaire, and all subsequent outbreaks have been in Africa. In most cases, an infected person experiences sudden onset of fever, weakness, muscle and joint pains, and headache, followed by progressive weakness, lack of appetite, diarrhea, sometimes containing blood and mucus, nausea, and vomiting. The initial symptoms are nonspecific and are similar to other more common diseases such as the common cold or malaria. The next stage is more severe, with bleeding from the nose, gums, and skin, and bloody vomiting and stools. Other symptoms include skin rash, inflamed throat, and difficulty swallowing. It can take between 2 and 21 days from the point of infection for a person to begin to show symptoms. A person can get infected with the Ebola virus by direct contact with infected blood, secretions, tissues, organs, or other bodily fluids of dead or living infected persons. The risk for transmission in general is low in the initial stages of symptomatic patients. The virus can also be transmitted through material heavily contaminated with such fluids. It is transmitted by droplets and not in the air, so it is highly unlikely that someone would be infected with the Ebola virus disease just by coming into casual contact with somebody already sick, such as sitting next to someone and without any direct contact or bodily. Most people are infected from another person, but some people have been infected with it from handling dead wild animals in Africa, such as chimpanzees and bats. The incubation period, time from exposure to infection or apparent symptoms, is 2 to 21 days, but 8 to 10 days is most common. People only become infectious once they start to have symptoms. The risk of being infected in the early phase of symptomatic patients is generally low. The risk of infection is much higher in the later stages of the disease, but can be effectively addressed with the proper use of appropriate personal protective equipment. The Ebola virus is susceptible to disinfectants, bleach, and Ebola viruses are thought to circulate in wild animals in sub-Saharan Africa. They have been found in fruit bats, chimpanzees, gorillas, and duikers, and human infections have been linked to direct contact with such animals. An outbreak of the Ebola virus can be stopped by breaking the chain of transmission. This can be done by isolating suspected and confirmed patients to prevent onward transmission. At the same time, people who have been in close contact with patients are also contacted and monitored to identify possible infections. If you develop fever, muscle aches, weakness, headache, and sore throat, you have been in a known infected area. Having had contact with blood, secretions, or organs, or other bodily fluids Go seek a doctor to see if you might have the Ebola virus. Since its discovery in 1976, the majority of cases and outbreaks of Ebola virus have occurred in Africa. The 2014 to 2016 Ebola outbreak in West Africa began in a rural setting of southeastern Guinea, spread to urban areas and crossed borders within weeks, and became a global epidemic within months. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved the Ebola vaccine on December 19 of 2019. The Ebola vaccine is a single-dose vaccine regimen that has been found to be safe and protective against only the Zaire Ebola virus species of Ebola virus. This is the first FDA approval of a vaccine for Ebola, but it can also be contained by balancing the patient's fluids and electrolytes, maintaining their oxygen status and blood pressure, and treating them for complicating infections. The 5 different types of Ebola virus species are the Zaire Ebola virus, which is capable of infecting humans, the Sudan Ebola virus, also capable of infecting humans, the Typhus Ebola virus was previously known as Cote d'Ivoire Ebola virus, which is also capable of infecting humans. The Bundibugyo Ebola virus is also capable of infecting humans, but the Reston Ebola virus so far is only known for infecting non-human primates. Ebola virus is diagnosed using the following lab tests: antibody capture enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay, antigen detection tests, serum neutralization test, reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction assay, electron microscope, and virus isolation by cell culture. Scientists believe that these viruses are borne by animals, and they blame bats as the most likely natural reservoir for Ebola virus. The Ebola virus is known to at first affect the dendritic cells. These cells are our first line of defense, and in case of a foreign encounter, these cells activate the T lymphocytes, or the white blood cells in our body. The white blood cells in turn destroy the infected cells so that the virus fails to replicate. But because the T cells fail to get activated by the Ebola virus, then the antibodies that depend on their activation also fail to fight the Ebola virus, thus giving away a clear path to the deadly virus, and it starts replicating quickly. Once inside the body, the virus travels through blood to different parts of the body. Macrophages, a type of immune cells in our body, then eat up these virus strains and get infected. These infected cells then release a type of protein that leads to coagulation by forming small blood clots that prevent a proper and steady supply of blood to different organs. Apart from clotting proteins, the infected macrophages also release other types of proteins along with nitric oxide that are responsible for damaging the linings of the blood vessels. As this happens, the blood vessels start leaking, leading to external hemorrhage, such as nose and eyes bleeding. Once the Ebola virus manages to reach the liver, things get real nasty. The virus simply destroys those cells that are responsible for producing proteins, which are known for coagulating the blood during external bleeding. Cells in gastrointestinal tracts also get infected and damaged, and this leads to diarrhea followed by dehydration. The virus also travels to adrenaline glands and damages cells that control blood pressure by producing special types of steroids. This leads to complete collapse of the circulatory system, and organs of the body start starving. For this project, we also had to find at least 3 people's stories that have recovered from the Ebola virus. And the first story I want to tell you about is about Nancy. She was a missionary who went to Nigeria to be a doctor. And when the first Ebola patient arrived at the ELWA hospital on June 11, soon followed by dozens more, Nancy was charged with overseeing health workers as they donned personal protective equipment and spraying them with a bleach solution after they'd been in contact with patients. When I did the decontamination, I was 5 feet away, insists Nancy, who did not wear her personal protective equipment, but instead a disposable plastic gown, gloves, and surgical mask. During her 16-hour workdays, she also spent time with patients' family members and trained a young Liberian to help her with decontamination. She says, "I never felt like I was in a situation where I was exposed, but she soon began feeling achy and feverish in early July, assuming she was suffering a recurrence of the malaria she'd contracted months earlier. She started a second course of treatment for the mosquito-borne disease, but she later found out that her and another doctor had gotten the Ebola virus, so she had to wait in her room for at least 2 weeks while receiving treatment. It could be so bad that she couldn't even move, and she said that the bed sheets would hurt so bad that she didn't really want to live anymore. But through her faith, she survived. She was healed from the Ebola virus about a month later." Another story I want to tell you guys about is about Kanyeru Vatir. He felt devastated after her mother was killed by the Ebola virus, but she still refused to heed a doctor's advice that she should go to the Katwa Ebola Treatment Center for screening, even though her father was hospitalized there. The day when her illness got worse, she rushed to a private health center known as Bonberger. The doctor at this center also urged her to go to the Katwa Ebola Treatment Center, but she refused. She started vomiting blood, but Kanier still refused to go to the Katwa Ebola Treatment Center. When she realized that they could refer her to the Katwa Ebola Treatment Center at any time, she decided to run away. She removed the intravenous perfusion line and sought refuge with one of her neighbors, a police commanding officer. But from there, she was made up to go to the Katwa Ebola Treatment Center during the night. She eventually went to the Katwa Ebola Treatment Center, and they treated her to the point where now she's healthy, telling other people about her story, and that if they go now, before it's too late, then they can hopefully be saved just like her. The third and final story that I want to tell you guys about is about Kazreki Maisa. Hofet's story started with his son. He fell ill and they went to a local hospital. A patient touched his baby and he was contaminated after 2 weeks. They didn't know it was Ebola, and so they went to another general hospital, and after 2 days, his baby died. In November of 2018, his wife also fell sick, and they thought that it was poison. They went to see a traditional doctor who tested her and confirmed to them that it was indeed poison. He tried to cure her, but after 1 week, his wife died also. After this, his mother became sick as she was close to my wife. They started doubting it was poison. At that point, friends working for the response intervened. His mother did the swab test and they found out she had Ebola, but by that time she was very sick and died in the hospital. At this point, he and his dad went to the Ebola treatment center and found that they both had Ebola too. They stayed 17 days at the Ebola treatment center in November of 2018. They both survived, so now he takes care of the children that are parentless for the time that their parents are in the hospital getting taken care of. I just want to thank you for listening to my project.